Hi, everybody. This is Tuesday, January 13th. This is the Community Preservation Committee. And I'm going to start with a quick roll call. Here we have Burton. I just turned your sound off.
Uh, Burton Flint Select Board appointee.
Andrew,
Andrew Boardman, Planning Board appointee.
Jeff,
Jeff Collins, Select Board appointee.
Nancy,
Nancy Nelson, Historical Commission appointee.
Ed,
Edward Larner, housing appointee.
and I'm Eve Eisenberg, a Select Board appointee. We're missing Diane, who I'm pretty sure is coming, and Matt and Bill can't make it, I guess. So we're it. We have a full agenda. Minutes are going to have to be tabled until next month, which I know everyone is going to be super disappointed about not being able to vote on minutes right now. But I would like to just, unless somebody has anything to say about it, I'd just like to jump into our agenda and hit it with the Natural Resources Commission Conservation Fund and maybe a little presentation from Delia if Delia wants to get started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Eve. Glad to be here tonight. And Sarah Grimwood, the chair of the NRC, is here as well. And I'll just give a brief overview of what I think are some questions that the CPC has remaining from your meeting in December, which I'm sorry I was not able to attend. It sounded to me like the major question that CPC has is around the governance of a conservation fund. I do want to point out this is different from the land funds that the town established as a bylaw in 1986. So the NRC was originally established to preserve and protect natural resources, and Concord adopted the Conservation Commission Act in 1959 at 1959 town meeting, making it one of the first communities in the Commonwealth to do so. The Conservation Commission Act authorizes conservation commissions, or the NRC in Concord, to act independently to preserve and protect natural resources in town with funds that are available to it. Over 24 communities in the Commonwealth have conservation funds that are funded in part through CPA monies. The Conservation Commission Act, in and of itself, is sufficient to establish a conservation fund. This is different from CMAT, or the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, which required a local bylaw to establish governance of its fund and how it's administered. Earlier this year, or in late December, 2 members of the Select Board recommended that the NRC consider a conservation fund bylaw for town meeting approval that outlines governance of its conservation fund. And the NRC endorsed this idea to ensure that CPC, the public, staff, other boards and committees, and future boards and committees and staff understand how the fund was established and how it is administered. Both the NRC and the Select Board need to finalize the language of the bylaw, but we are confident that a conservation fund bylaw will be on the 2026 town meeting warrant. There also seem to be questions about what the fund would be used for from the last meeting in December. And under the budget section of the application, what I had written was that the funds would be used towards appraisals, environmental assessments, surveys, title costs, and other due diligence and professional services that are related to land acquisition. And we can share a copy of the bylaw if that is helpful to the CPC. I have a copy up if that is useful, but I really just wanted to sort of lay that out as a framework and then open it up to the committee for questions.
Thank you, Delia. That's great. I'm not sure yet if we need a copy up on our screen, and I'm sure you're working on it and you're going to distribute it at some point anyway. But just to summarize the bylaw, what is the exact governance, the 4 points or 3 points or how many points there are?
Right. So the governance of the use of the funds, and I am just going to share it because I think it's easier if I can do that, because it has 3 sections to it. And I think the select board and the NRC are in alignment with everything about the bylaw except a point about whether the select board is consulted on acquisitions or that means I can share, sorry. Or if it is that the select board has veto authority over the use of the funds, which would be in conflict with state law. So this is section 1 is just describing what the fund is, and section 2, how the fund is administered and what can be used from the fund. And I do want to point out, so, you know, there's acquisition of CRs, APRs, easements, the conservation or options for the same. Preservation, protection, management of land. This clause would be in the conservation fund, but any CPA monies directed into the fund would not be used for this purpose because that's not an allowed use. As you know, CPC knows that's maintenance is not an allowed use. And so that would just be any other monies that were directed into the fund by town meeting, but not CPA monies. And then appraisal, engineering, planning, legal services, as I mentioned. And then this is the sticking point between the select board and the NRC that we need to come to some resolution on, whether or not it's the select board providing a veto over use of the monies from the fund for land acquisition, or whether it is in consultation with the select board.
Okay, and Delia, sorry, you want to talk about the third section?
So as far as the third section, it just outlines that it's basically the town treasurer would take in the monies and hold them and be subject to a number of different laws and regulations, and would issue checks as directed by the NRC, which is really just how the law is already, but it provides a structure and something in writing for people to understand. It sort of collates a number of different laws. It's nothing new here.
Okay, that's great. When land is acquired by the NRC, is it according to some laid out schedule or plan that was already thought through, or how does that work?
Right, so that's a great question, and we talked about this with the select board last night, and it is in the application, and perhaps it's not clear enough that for the purposes of the conservation funds, monies from that fund would be used for the acquisition of parcels that are identified in the open space and recreation plan. So there are other parcels that the town has acquired that are within the open space and recreation plan, and those would continue to go to town meeting. Quite frankly, I think most parcels will continue to go to town meeting for approval because that's just the process that we follow. But there are cases where the NRC needs to be in a position to move more quickly so that it doesn't lose parcels that a seller is unable to wait for the town meeting cycle.
Okay, great, thank you. Burton?
Yeah, Delia, you just were touching on exactly what I was going to ask about. So in my view, the CPC should only sort of delegate its authority on how these funds are spent to another committee in the case where our ability to effectuate the goals of the Community Preservation Act would be we wouldn't be able to meet them because of our funding cycle. So that's almost always in the land purchase scenario where we can't jump in time. Can you give us an example of specific to the NRC where there has been a land acquisition where the funding has not become available because of our funding cycle, where this would have solved that problem? I'm certainly familiar on the housing side where we've sort of had to jump through some hoops, but I'm not familiar with any land acquisition cases.
So there was a recent one within the past 5 years where a parcel of lands that was identified as a parcel of conservation interest went to auction, and seller was not interested in selling to the town. And we were unable to put forward adequate funds for the purchase of that parcel, and it is now in private ownership. This is a parcel of land that is surrounded on three sides by the town forest. And as I said, has been identified as a parcel of conservation interest.
Okay, and so that was one parcel in the last 5 years. Is this, I guess I feel like for us to do this, we're delegating a lot of authority. Or is that something that you felt like you've run into, sort of, I mean, you've been around, seen this. Is that something you've seen a lot of, or is this?
No, I mean,
Okay.
most sellers that we are able to work with, I mean, these parcels are known and we
Right.
are communicating with landowners. But there are some who are more willing to work with the town than others. There is another, sort of in the offing that, but no, it is not a common occurrence. And so I think this is really a fund that is really an emergency fund. I think the NRC's process would typically be to continue to go to town meeting and go through that process, because most landowners have been able to wait for that cycle, which can be, in some cases, depending on when the land comes on the market, can be close to, can be over 1.5 years.
Okay, and my last question on this, I'm gonna have to be vague because my memory is vague on this, but I know that, under certain laws, the town gets a right of first refusal when somebody has benefited from, is it an agricultural tax credit or is it a,
Chapter, so any lands that is in a tax, state tax benefit, which is a voluntary program that requires reporting every year. So agricultural lands of a certain size, forestry lands that have a forestry plan, and recreational parcels. The town does have the ability to pursue a right of first refusal, but it has to match a bona fide offer. So somebody has
right,
buying the land, and
right.
then comes to the town, and the town has 90 days upon, I think it's 90 or maybe it's 120 days upon which it can act.
And the reason I asked the question is because I think those may go through the planning board to make a recommendation. This was where I may have some vague would this be funding that could be used towards that? Because as I recall, as a planning board, we looked at this and said, okay, do we want to exercise the right of first refusal? But there's sort of an open question as to whether there's any funding there. Is this kind of that scenario where somebody's previously received this tax benefit? They've got to ask for the town's right of first refusal, and then boom. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Since, I would have to check the numbers, but I would say half the parcels that have come up have been pursued for acquisition. And sometimes that has been transferring that right of first refusal to the land trust, which may have more funding available, but that's not,
Right.
that can ever be a guarantee.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much.
I just have one quick question, Delia, are there any rumors, excuse me, are there any rumors of funding outside of CPC going into this conservation fund at this point?
No, we don't have any, we haven't heard anything about that. I mean, typically other communities have appropriated funds at town meeting to be deposited into a conservation fund. Any gifts that were, some benefactors said to the NRC, we want to give you money to put into that fund. Those would have to be approved by the select board in order to be deposited into that fund.
Okay, so at the moment, the only funding will come from the CPC, and it's and you're requesting 500,000, which is not a whole lot for land acquisition, right? Okay, Jeff?
Thanks, Eve. Yeah, the question Burton raised about Chapter 61 is kind of the most important case I can think of where the town has that 90-day right of first refusal, and even if the conservation fund is not adequate for acquisition, we could enter an option or do something to keep the conversation going until the funding can be discussed at town meeting. And those could also be opportunities where the landowner is not terribly interested in selling to the town, but the town has this right to step in to pursue a transaction. And so having funds available would be important. Delia mentioned one opportunity that was missed because funding wasn't available. But I think we could probably think of several projects that were only possible because the seller was patient with the town. And the one that comes to mind for me is Assabet Bluff, which we all look back as, super successful joint use for conservation and affordable housing. And that was only possible, this for sale signs had already gone up. And, this was a landowner who was well established and a long family history in Concord and was willing to tap the brakes and wait till the town and land trusts could pull together funding. So that was a good example because of a patient seller, but we won't always have a patient seller.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. If none of the other committee members have anything to say, I'd love to hear what Mary has to say.
Thank you, Eve. It's kind of you to let me speak at this point. I just wanted to add a little bit of color to the discussion that we had last night with some members of the NRC at the select board. It was quite a long discussion. First of all, we're very grateful to the NRC for coming to the town and asking the town if in fact they want to establish a conservation fund. So we think that's consistent with the idea of transparency. And so, yes, we will sponsor an article at the town meeting to ask to establish the conservation fund. The sticking point around the approval process or the governance, we debated that for quite a while. And we could, it's not right for us to talk right now about the pros and the cons. But after discussing it for quite a while, the select board voted unanimously to require a select board approval if they're going to go forward with this warrant article. So I wanted to clarify that as far as I'm concerned, there's no ambiguity. That will be the wording in the conservation fund article. That's separate from your decision as far as how much you want to fund it or not, and whether the town agrees to fund it or not. That's a separate. But I just wanted to be clear on the select board's decision last night.
Okay, so it's the select board warrant article then to
It
set
is.
up the conservation fund?
That's right.
Okay, thank
Well,
you.
and
That's a clear, it's a little complicated to have one board propose a bylaw for another board. So I think there's a question about that, but we have some time before the warrant closes to figure out those nuances.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, okay. Just I guess whether it's a select board warrant article or an NRC article, the select board had a vote last night that was very clear. So I think we know the select board's position.
Right. And
Okay, thank you.
The NRC voted so the select, that nuance of the language about whether the select board has veto authority over an NRC decision to spend money from that fund. The NRC had a different vote that said they would not be comfortable with that and that they would be comfortable in the current process of consulting with the select board. So I think there is, I hope we.
Oh, you had another meeting? Oh, you had another NRC meeting?
Last week?
No, I mean, but after the vote last night?
Nope. Nope, the NRC voted. I think we mentioned that last
Okay,
night.
we're clear. I think we're clear. I think I've informed the board as far as the decision of the select board. And I don't know if that really matters whether you want to, the decision of the CPC, whether they want to ask the town to fund that. But I just wanted to make sure that we had clarity on what happened last night at the select board.
Thank you for reporting back from the select board vote last night, Mary. Ed?
Just a question about all the different parties involved in preserving land in town. Before Christmas, I got a filing from the Spencer Brook Preserve, and they said they needed to raise over $2 million by January. Is this something that would be done by the land, the conservation trust? Is that a possibility? Since they may raise only half that amount of money, that we could, they have to raise the whole, they have to raise the money themselves rather than ask for money from the CPC stuff or through the CPC.
So yes, that Spencer Brook parcel is entirely a land trust fundraising efforts. They certainly have the ability as a private nonprofit to come to CPC and request funding but it wouldn't have any bearing on the conservation funds that CPC recommends and or hopefully recommends for town meeting approval. That would solely be for monies expended by the town, by the natural.
Obviously, there's great support for these preservation issues. So.
Andrew.
Yeah, so I guess that question feeds into what I think my fundamental question about cooperation is, where you have a private entity doing this, going out there and trying to raise $2 million, but the town has put all of its eggs for preservation in this land fund. Where's the obligation to cooperate? You know, they could come as an emergency and say, hey, we have this opportunity, we've negotiated it, it's fully baked and ready to go, but without actual funds in our bank, the CPC doesn't have that ability. We've deferred it to the town. So I guess the NRC, the actual just that board. So the question for me becomes, where do we lose? Does that take away something from this board without actually having an appropriate, like, what it's intended for? You know, do we lose something by doing that, as opposed to just holding on to it in the CPC for eligible projects? I mean, that's my ultimate question. And as a CPC, how do we balance that? Because I understand the goal, I understand the NRC's position of the only way this is going to work is if we get some money that's available quickly. The problem then for me becomes, you've set aside this money and it means no one else can use it but you. And for me, that's a big sticking point. And it's a difficulty that I still haven't really seen. And I've seen some of the difficulty even in how to categorize what controls people would want. The select board clearly has an opinion, and the NRC isn't comfortable with their opinion. Well, we're being asked to hand them $500,000, and I still don't have a sense of what controls everyone's even agreed to. You know, one side's looking at the legal minimum, one side would look at a little bit more, and we have our own controls that we have in place and have set up over the course of years. And I'm just don't feel like I'm getting any answers. So I don't know if that's a question or a statement, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, Andrew, I understand what you're talking about. And I didn't even, I think Delia mentioned it when going through those 4 points of section 2, where CPC money can't be used for maintenance, that whole portion of it. But we're, you know, we're sort of given up all of our oversight after the money has left the CPC to even just double check that that's what's going on. I realize that checks have to be approved by the treasurer. That's sort of one check. So if our treasurer is on deck with that, Andrew, the treasurer, then you would see what was coming in and what was being used from the conservation fund for money, right? But why am I talking? I think Sarah is on deck to answer your question.
Thank you. I know Andrew was talking in general terms, so this doesn't actually help, but I did want to just share the good news that the Conservation Trust let us know at a meeting last week that they have they're on goal to actually raise all the funding they need for Spencer Brook Valley. So that's not going to come up this year.
Okay, good. That's a good piece of news.
In terms of the question about, would this take a pot of money, as I understand it, Andrew, one of your questions or concerns is, would this, if the conservation fund is established, would this take a pot of money away from a land trust or other entity that's looking, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, it's a question of whether the CPC, your entire point is speed is necessary, right? And that without speed, these opportunities are lost. But in a sense, with speed, the control that the CPC has, as well as the process that the CPC has of actually making sure that the town is comfortable with these decisions. Like, and I understand it, but it's sort of two different sides of the it's two different sides of the issue. I understand it's where speed is important versus where you're valuing the process that has been set up and in place is valid, and I just don't know how to balance those two things.
No, I guess
And
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I guess I would say two things. One, speed is definitely a major part of this, but another major part of this is the other incidentals that are associated with land acquisition. So the due diligence, the appraisals, all the other elements that would be part of a conservation fund. And then I guess in relation to this is a very similar bylaw that is the CPC is comfortable with the Concord Municipal Affording Housing Trust bylaw. The difference being that they have select board approval because and we're working through that with select board, and we will come to some agreement, which I think, and I'm not a member of the CPC, so I don't mean to be presuming anything, but I think the governance has been or will be established by town meeting in whatever fashion that comes to. The question is whether or not you're going to give money to a conservation fund similarly to how you do that for CMAT. And this is not a new thing for CMAT to be here. Sorry, Keith, I
Okay.
Hey, already voted affirmatively.
Delia, quick question. That's why I asked about why, like where what the plan was. When land is acquired and you say it comes out of the plan that it's created for acquiring land, and that plan, does that go through any approval processes with the town first? Like, does the town get to see what the goals are in the form of a map? And then if land comes up only in that map, that's what's being used for CPC funds for acquired. So there is input in the town from the town already on the parcels before they're even presented as possible acquisition, right? Andrew, does that answer your question or a part of it about like NRC gone wild versus a
It's
carefully
not
curated?
NRC gone wild. It's just and I mean, like, it's not that I think anyone's going to spend money on things that are not appropriately conservation issues. It's more, it's just I don't have a sense very well. I mean, I'm looking at the map right now. It's like 13 parcels or something that are 14 that are specifically identified. Um, and so it's sort of yeah, I guess that's it's 14 parcels, so you also I guess it's 60. I'm looking at this numbers trying to they move in a loop-de-loop, so it's actually hard to see exactly what but the Spencer Brook one wasn't on it. So does that mean if they did come to you for money, you could not give it to them based on the way it's governed? Or, it's these questions I don't have a sense of an answer. And it's partially because I didn't see that governing document of what the actual uh, warrant article thing was going to be in advance, because I had a question about governance in the beginning, and it was just basically whatever the legal minimum is, yes, we'll comply with that. And I don't know if the legal minimum is sufficient for what I would look for. That's all. So I'll defer to someone who actually had a real question.
Okay, Jeff?
Maybe this is less a question than maybe a contribution, but I think the open space and recreation plan is important. And I think the element of speed is important, but I maybe I heard a little bit in Andrew's commentary that the idea of parking money, if it's not doing work for CPC or not doing work we intend, is a bit of a concern. And I've raised in the past the idea for these types of funds of having some maximum that I suppose we have time to talk about in the future. And then if we see that pot is being drawn from and it's being actively used for the intended purpose, then the applicant can come back and say, hey, we need to top off that fund. And then there's that walking around money or pocket money to respond to opportunities. I think the way it's constructed, the same we've heard in conversations about the Conversation Fund and the Affordable Housing Trust, is serving the same purpose of allowing our representatives to do this work, to be nimble and respond to opportunities. And I think in this case, we'd get more conservation work done.
Jeff, yeah, thank you. I was going to mention that too. You mentioned that idea, I think, at our last meeting, and I like that idea a lot. I mean, I would love to see somewhere it written that CPC money was not, if it's not matched by the town, but at least there's some other source of funding besides CPC for this fund. I'm not sure how that would happen. I know there's nothing enforceable, but I think it's kind of sad that it's just the CPC funding the conservation fund. It would be great if we could somehow get other sources that were not just donations. Burton?
Yeah, thanks, Eve. And Andrew, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I get the sense of what you're saying is you're concerned about essentially our delegation of authority here. And I've expressed these concerns over the last several years when it comes to just delegating chunks of money for housing. But I think in that case, there's a really compelling argument to be made that there are opportunities to acquire properties for housing that may be out of cycle. What I haven't seen is examples really of opportunities where we've missed conserving land as a result. And the difference here really is if we do this, the town as a legislative body, when we come to get together at town meeting, doesn't get to vote on the particular decisions. And I would say that in terms of the particular projects, and when we look at, for example, how the Housing Trust has spent funds, I don't know to the degree. I mean, we're getting lots of, we're getting reports from the Housing Trust and the like, but I once we send that money out, if we're honest with ourselves, we don't have much say in how it's spent, right? Of course, they're coming back to us for additional funding, but we don't have much say. So to the degree we consider this committee's charge to be spending this special set aside from our property tax bills and having a direct sort of responsibility to town meeting, this is one more step where we're removing that, where we're delegating off to a committee that gets a bundle of money and gets to spend the money without having direct responsibility to town meeting. And I Andrew, if I've captured your concern, that's my concern as well here. We haven't done a bad job, so why do we need to delegate it out?
Okay, so but Burton, if the bylaw says that the CPC money can be used basically only for acquisition, not maintenance, and presumably someday some money might get in there that might be for maintenance as well, so that the conservation fund can accomplish all of its goals.
Yeah.
Then we're just sort of contributing to a larger fund to execute what we are supposed to be doing. Like the prime objective of the CPC is to help conserve land. The open space part of it is about land acquisition, really. And that we had that discussion last February when we were talking about the only thing that at that point could be an exception to our the process that we have is land acquisition, right?
Right. And to take it a step further, I think that we would be, in any land acquisition, we would be following the recommendation of the committees that we're talking about delegating authority to, right? On the other hand, like I can imagine scenarios where we think, well, is this committee, is it focused on one side of town versus the other side of town or what have you? I mean, the fact of the matter is that if it's the NRC that's making the decision, there's not a vote at town meeting on spending this tax dollars on a particular project. There isn't. Versus where if we do it, there's that opportunity for the town to vote. So if instead of spending money on conserving land off of Lowell Road, maybe there's something on near the rifle range or what have you. That's something that the town gets to vote on.
Delia, do you want to respond to Burton?
So this just goes back to the question about how the open space plan is developed, and it's a plan that's developed with substantial community input. It's a committee that is made up of representatives from the Select Board, Natural Resources Commission, Planning Board, Recreation Commission. It can vary, but the last plan included members from West Concord Advisory Committee, CPC, the Land Trust, at-large members. I'm sure I'm forgetting it's a large committee. There's a townwide survey that is mailed out. There are public forums that people are invited to attend. And one of the main purposes is to identify, in that open space framework that identifies the large natural areas and large agricultural areas, identifies parcels of conservation interest. That plan is then reviewed by boards and committees. It's endorsed, planning board and, every board and committee that I just mentioned endorsed the last open space and recreation plan, and then it goes to the state for review and approval. So it's a rigorous and robust process by which the community has a lot of input. And I guess the other thing that I would say, and I do understand the concern about not necessarily going to town meeting for a specific purchase. And in some cases, I mean, it's a $500,000 fund, so that's not a lot of money to acquire any land. So the normal process would continue where the NRC would go, hopefully with a willing landowner, or if not, with the conservation funds, they would have the ability to purchase an option and then go to town meeting for approval. I'm trying to think, and I don't know of any parcel of lands that has ever gone to town meeting for conservation purposes that has been rejected by town meeting. So while I agree it's very important to have a robust public input into all of these conversations, town meeting has certainly supported preservation of land for conservation purposes.
Sure. And that's been the historic practice, that's where the majority of CPC's funding has gone, or not majority, the plurality of CPC funding has gone over the years. Well, I guess just where I worry about is that we, as a committee, we get to the point where we say, all right, it's September, we're going to give 30% to housing, we're going to give 30% to land, to natural resources, and we're going to give 30% to recreation, and our job's done. There we go. Right. And we just become a intermediary in terms of funneling out to specific purposes rather than specific groups rather than actually considering projects. I think we've got a lot of expertise on this committee, and I would hope that we can continue to leverage that rather than just delegate out to not subcommittees, but additional town committees. And with that, I will let other people speak.
It's funny, Burton, because I think of it the exact opposite way that you're thinking of it, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not as smart as you. But in my mind, I feel like
au contraire.
In my mind, I feel like that the conservation fund will take a piece of our money that we're no good at, which is funding quickly a land acquisition. And we have loads of other open space and recreation projects coming in where, it's restore this path or, here's some trails or the bike path or adding, benches to things and all of this stuff that we've been doing. It's not, to me, this is not like the Housing Trust where we did just, vote to give up everything and let all the housing projects run through the Housing Trust. This is not that, and because they can only do the one thing, which is acquire some land, and that doesn't seem to happen terribly often. So it's going to make us more effective as a CPC because we can, put our little sign on the land that the CPC helped acquire as for conservation, and we can't do that by, really quickly anyway. If it's within the plan, the resources plan that's already been approved by the
Yeah.
town,
Yeah, exactly.
then it becomes like us executing our objective through the fund as just one of the many things that we do for open space and recreation, not like housing. You know what I mean? Okay, anyway,
Point well made. Yep.
Jeff, you had your hand up. What happened?
You had made some of my points, but I'm fundamentally confused as still claiming to be a new member of the committee of the level of scrutiny on this, where we had asked Delia to come back with a governance document and the NRC was responsive, and our draft recommendation of $785,000 for the great work of the Affordable Housing Trust. So I with this idea of not parking too much money on the sidelines with some idea of a cap on those funds, they seem parallel to me, where we're empowering our committees and volunteers, our staff and volunteers, to carry out that work. That's a priority of this committee.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to circle back to Andrew.
Yeah, no, I guess, Eve, your comment about this solving a problem that this committee isn't good at, of moving fast for land acquisition. I think it ultimately comes back to, for me, this is solving a problem, or it's a solution in search of a problem. Delia admitted that this really doesn't happen, and there's the potential for it. Everyone can see that there's the potential, but that it's one every 5 to 10 years, and that opportunity is lost. But the town has good relationships with those people who are actual target. It's not the one. So it seems to be giving a lot of authority that the CPC has and a lot of the controls away to solve a hypothetical problem, and that's yeah.
Okay, Delia, is that what you admitted?
I would, no, I wouldn't put it that way. I did.
Sorry, I wouldn't say admit. That would be too far.
Well, correct. I mean, we don't do land acquisitions frequently. The last one was the Assabet River Bluff. That was probably, close to 5 years ago. And the one before that was also close to 5 years ago. So if we're losing a parcel every 5 years, that's not happening.
Yeah, they're not making any more Concord, are they? Ed, now you had your hand up and you put it down again. What was it you were
I
gonna say?
noticed Keith's hand up, and I was going to say maybe Keith could answer some of the questions about control and how CPC it works. And it was all worked out when we developed the trust. And so I'm referring myself to Keith.
Okay. Well, one of my committee members would like to hear from Keith. Keith, would you like to talk to us about the NRC and the Conservation Fund?
NRC. No. The housing.
Yes, Keith Bergman, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. I was also the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw study or committee that wrote that bylaw. And I just wanted to point out that the state statute under which the Affordable Housing Trusts can acquire property without a vote of town meeting does not require that the select board be involved in any way. However, when we wrote the bylaw, mindful that we wanted the select board to bring that bylaw to town meeting on our behalf, we thought that adding property to the town's rolls ought to require an approval of the select board. So we gratuitously wrote that into our bylaw, and that's how it passed, and that's how that bylaw exists. Town council is certainly going to tell the parties what you can and cannot do in a conservation fund bylaw. So that, I would urge that issue get resolved in whatever text comes to town meeting. And also, I think it would be important, since we already have a conservation fund, and We don't have a conservation fund. Okay, so we've been authorized since 1969 to have one, and we've never had one. Okay, so the only examples that the NRC has in acquiring property to date outside of town meeting, presumably, are those gifts of open space land, which do require the select board's approval in order to accept them. So anyway, those are the only points I wanted to raise. The mechanics of it is something that I hope town council can get involved with. It's important to the trust to have a cooperative working relationship with our appointing authority, the select board. And it's also important for the trust to have the trust of our funder, the Community Preservation Committee, which is why we take seriously the use of the funds that we are granted and are very mindful that if we ever want to get any further funding out of the CPC, we better be very sure that the decisions that we're making are in concert with what the CPC's goals and expectations are. And we even have a mechanism to do that, and it's called the quarterly Concord Housing Roundtable, where the CPC, as well as the Select Board, Planning Board, and the 4 groups with housing in their name, meet quarterly, look at what is in our universe of potential acquisitions and funders, and we look around the room to sort of make sure all the heads are shaking in the same direction, up and down, and not side to side. So thanks for the work that everyone on this call is doing for the town, and I'm sure that you'll figure out the right way to do it. Thanks.
Thanks for your vote of confidence, Keith. Sometimes we need to hear that. Okay, I just have I have 2 points, I think. The first one is whatever money if we were to give money to fund this application for a conservation fund, if we decided not to, that money would go into an open space reserve. I just want everybody in my committee to understand that. It's not going to go back into the unbudgeted reserves. And the other thing is, I would like to ask Jeff, do you have any ideas of how your cap might work? I mean, I realize you're new to the committee, but this is this is uncharted land for me too. How would that work? We would just trust the committee to get another application, decide next year, or we don't decide that now, I don't think, because it's not on the table. On the table is only $500,000 to the conservation fund.
I think it would be higher than 500,000. Maybe $1 million. I think again, in my mind, and I'm happy to be educated on the differences with the Conservation Fund and the Affordable Housing Trust, or at least the CPC's investment in that fund, seem to serve parallel purposes in my mind. And so those 2 entities, we could think about, that level of sort of standing investment. And as that's utilized, if we have the funds and if we think that's a priority, we can refill those pots. And to Keith's good point, if it's not being used, we have a mechanism to rescind, or B, if it's not being used in some way that the CPC over the years isn't confident, then there's no obligation going forward to continue to fund that.
So, Anne, would the memorandum of understanding for the Conservation Fund have the 30-month restriction on it, like all the other applications do?
No, I don't think it would. I don't think we do that for the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. It's a direct transfer. It's not a project. So there wouldn't be a time limit. Okay.
So it is basically just a fund, and then we just decide year after year if we've received more applications for more money, if the committee is going to continue to fund it and at one level. So I think that's the way that would have to work. But that's not something we need to decide today. Today we have to get ready for Anne to turn in our overdue draft warrant article. And so we need to decide if we're going to support $500,000 for a conservation fund today. And if there's 6 of us, which is awkward, but if all the 6 of us are ready, I would like to entertain a motion to vote on this. What do people think? Burton, you went away. Are you there, Burton?
I am here. Sorry. Yep. I was eating my dinner.
You're allowed to eat your
Yep.
dinner.
Yep.
I just want to see, can you nod your head if you feel comfortable voting on this at this point? Because I think we
Yep.
kind of have to. That's
Yeah.
our job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So Nancy, you've been very quiet. Do you want to make this motion?
Yeah, I move that CPC vote to support the application for $500,000 for the conservation fund.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, great. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Andrew?
Can't
I'm
hear you.
still no.
No. Ed?
Aye.
Jeff?
I
Nancy?
Aye.
Burton?
No.
And I'm an aye. So that passes 4-2, I think. Thank you very much, Delia and Sarah, for coming by. I appreciate it. Good luck sorting out how this is going to work. Your highlighted line there is your problem, not mine, but I'm sure you'll figure it out before town meeting.
So if something goes wrong, you don't have to do it again. So it's not an irreversible thing. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
Nancy. Okay, if there aren't any other questions on that, we have another big chunk of agenda here to tackle, and I would like to move on to Tom. So what happened since our last meeting? I want to catch up our committee. I was thinking about what Jeff said at our last meeting, what we're talking about here is the Wright Tavern application for $250 to fund a bunch of stuff. Yeah. Sorry, 250,000. Yes, thank you. And we, as a committee, we voted not to support that application. But Jeff had mentioned in our comments that, maybe we could divide it up and, figure out some smaller amount. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking maybe we could look at this one more time. Something Burton had said about, committing now. We can't add later, but we can add now and take away later. We have more flexibility than I was panicking, trying to get through all of this stuff all at once. And that's not really fair. So I asked Tom to come back to us with a response to our meeting. And he did so with a letter, which I think we circulated on Thursday, and I hope everybody has had a chance to read. Tom, would you like to present your amended application request?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate meeting with you all again and being considered. I talked to Anne for a bit, but I really read with great interest the minutes of the November meeting about the questions and concerns you had about our approach, and the notion that there was a sense that what we were doing was serving more of I'll call it the commercial interest rather than the preservation interest of the building. And so we took that to heart, and there was more to it, but I was because I don't want to spend too much time giving a preamble here. Our board met then at the end of December, and I shared with them your comments and the concerns and questions. And the group decided that, probably seems that the one area that is more an enhancement of our current facilities is the use of installation of an HVAC system. So we probably can find other sources for funding that if we want to. We do have heat. We do have some level of air conditioning. There's some other issues, but that's another question, another issue. So, but the one area that we felt was really important was the electrical service side. And one other thing is assuming that you all know, a lot of the work, as we have found on the history of the building, has been done sort of, I call it on a piecemeal basis. They did a little this problem, they solved that, they do this, they do all that. And so a lot of things have sort of been done to keep the building sort of in some level of good repair, but we really need to take a more holistic approach. And a long time ago, when I used to own a old Victorian house. My wife at the time we had an old Victorian house that we bought relatively inexpensively in 1977. We worked with an architect, developed a long-range plan. We had no kids at the time. We had a dog, but that was it. And then what we did is we did renovations to that house we did it with a cognizant idea about what the long-term view was going to be. So as you move walls around or you do different things, you do it with the idea that there's going to be future uses of the building in this way. And so we're trying to take that approach, if you will, if you think about the Wright Tavern. And the electrical one has a couple of different interests, one of which there are some risks related to the current wiring. We don't know what all is there. And so I think cleaning up the electrical area is really important. But also with the institution, with the development, hopefully, of the refreshment center with refrigeration and heating units and a lot of things that we have to do, we know that there's going to be, our contractors have said, you're going to need more than a 200 amp service when you do that. And so we would like to do that while we're working on the electrical wiring and moving things to MC cabling as opposed to whatever is there now. While we're doing all that, let us all use that opportunity to increase the capacity of the electrical service from 200 to 400 amp. At the same time, we also would do some work with regards to light fixtures and plugs and things like that. So, and our idea is to step back for a second before we actually, I'll call it break ground. We actually work with an electrician to plan all that out. Then we go to, because we're under a preservation restriction agreement, that we go to the Historic Commission and say, here is our plan for what we want to do with the electrical work and all that sort of stuff, and then get their okay to move forward with that, and obviously meet with you all as well if you want to in that process. And so then we would begin the work to fix and repair, upgrade the electrical wiring system, increase the service area, and then move all that sort of forward. And then I was thinking that one thing else would be helpful, and I put this in the budget, but once again, it's not necessary, it's not critical, but it's while we're here, let's take a look at what we need in terms of what would an ideal HVAC system look like? What would it cost without making any commitments to anything? Here, just once again, understand what the capacity is of the insulation that's in the walls or the lack thereof. What's the story of the windows? What's the story of the doors? And just get an assessment of what would be necessary. Because one thing we are doing as we go through this is that we're acquiring more artifacts, sort of old paintings and old furniture. So we have to pay a lot of attention to both the heat, the cooling, the temperatures, as well as humidity. So we want to have a plan for what that needs to look like as we move forward. So our recommendation is we scaled it back from a 250 to about 130, focuses now exclusively on the electrical service elements and doing a kind of an assessment of what we might need for the future in terms of HVAC system. So that's our revised proposal. And I hope that's something of interest to you all.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. And before we go even further, I just want to thank you so much for your energy and your hope and your vision for this building. I think I know you're up against a whole bunch of other factors and characters that are not here in this Zoom room, and your energy is just admirable for this. So I want to thank you for all of your volunteering and all of your work. I'm just going to sum up your application on page 4, which shows $15,000 for mechanical and electrical assessment plan, includes reviews of the plan with the CPC and the Historic Commission, $35,000 for electrical improvements, including bringing the wiring up to code, installing some fixtures, and upgrading the service to 400 amp. I guess that the upgrading the service to 400 amp is an additional $42,000. $20,000 for an assessment of the HVAC current conditions and creating a plan for that, and $18,000 for contract management fees and contingency for a total of $130,000. I have asked Nancy to take some notes on all of this and to share her thoughts as our representative from the Historic Commission. And I was just, Ed, before we start our discussion, I'm sure we all want to hear what Nancy has to say. Certainly I do.
Okay. I agree with everything you said about Tom, and your patience is admirable. I'd like to ground this committee a little bit in the Secretary standards for the rehabilitation of historic structures. And one of the most important is that each property shall be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. And changes that create a false sense of historical development, such as adding conjectural features and architectural elements from other buildings, shall not be undertaken. That's one thing. And sometimes it's summarized as don't pursue fake history. So another one that's very important in the guidance from the Community Preservation Coalition is that it's a general rule of thumb that CPA can fund projects that deal with with tangible historic resources, but not with interpretation, historic interpretation, education, or heightening the awareness of history. I think that would also include not funding things that are meant to enhance the experience as opposed to working on the preservation of an historic resource. So those are just a couple of things there. I think initially with the first proposal, the question of the preservation restriction is still outstanding. Since 2022, the Historical Commission has been trying to get a finalized preservation restriction. And we still do not have that. So we are not operating under any kind of a signed agreement. And that is a problem in terms, I believe Tom, when he says, well, we're just going to pretend like it's enforced, but it's not really. The work required, as Tom also said, requires Historical Commission review of plans and specs. And funding is not only requested for an assessment, which for the installation of electrical, HVAC units, equipment, wiring, etc. But because there are no plans and specs, we don't know what actually is going to be installed, particularly with the replacement of lighting fixtures, which will have an impact on the building and its appearance. And maybe there are exterior additions too that would be concerning in terms of expanded electrical equipment outside the building. We don't have any idea yet. So this is information that really is needed before I think it's prudent to fund some work. Some of the work, I think, I've thought this before, would qualify for CPC funding, particularly the mechanical and electrical assessment and plan, the $15,000 item of the budget that you're now talking about, I think, and the $35,000 budget item, which would be to upgrade the wiring. I wonder how much those for the purchase of lighting fixtures that are ye old and that were never in the tavern. And then, I know part of your vision is to recreate an experience that brings people back to 1775. And that's a desire to do something that you don't have real information about doing. So I wonder about that. But the other thing is, I know you said that this is too expensive, but the CPA Coalition also recommends CPCs identify a staff person or board member who's an outside consultant who could oversee the work. In an addendum that you wrote on January 5th, those revisions still don't address the need to finalize the preservation restriction. Funding is requested for undefined future development, the antique furniture, the brewery, not fancy, but elaborate technology exhibits, which are driving the need to increase the electrical capacity and to create climate control for antique furniture, for instance. And those are things that aren't there yet. CHC as a whole, again, we still have not approved the revised request. Information on lighting and whatnot is not provided. and their locations. I did try to read the plans that you submitted, but they were very fuzzy. I actually could not read them. So I think it's in the right ballpark of what might be getting there, but we still don't know what they look like. And it's how it's going to actually impact the structure. I think there's a persistent vision that almost conflicts with the Secretary's standards in terms of wanting to create a 1775 experience when, you know, we really don't have the data to do that. I think there's three things that I think are they may be squarely within the Secretary standards for the rehabilitation of historic structures. That's the mechanical and the electrical assessment and plan, $15,000. Bring the wiring up to code at $35,000. I don't know how much of that is for new antique looking, but not really, fixtures. But and then the assessment of HVAC current conditions in the plan. And some of the HVAC may or may not be driven only by the brewery and the technology or whatnot. But anyway, those are the things I think are important for CPC to consider as we look at this plan, which goes beyond treating the structure and moves into creating the experience, which is not really part of what CPC is supposed to do.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. That was a lot, and I appreciate all of your hard work and your expertise. And I know you probably had to reread the Secretary standard into all of those regs all over again.
It's all the additions of the preservation restriction that have been produced, which Tom probably knows better than I do.
Tom, would you like to respond to Nancy before we continue our discussion?
Just a couple of things. One related to the preservation restriction agreement. I'll just be honest with you, I'm frustrated as well. It's been in the hands of First Parish and their attorneys for over 2 months, 3 months. And as of last couple of days, I reached back out to them and said, what is the status? And they said the attorney is still looking at it. So I'm trying to dog that one without burning my bridges with First Parish. So, but I am serious, and we have tried the best of our ability to operate as if it is in practice. And so we did that when we first started this journey, if you will, because we knew intentionally what we're doing. And so, you know, if there are issues that we have, we could talk about it another time, but not this evening. But you know, we really tried to stay commitment to that agreement as if it wasn't enforced. So that's one thing. Second thing is that I appreciate Nancy's concerns and questions about what are we really trying to do here? Are we just trying to recreate, just sort of have the ability to open and preserve it, and therefore just that's what, and that CPC funding shouldn't or anything else shouldn't be intended to create an experience. We could have an interesting discussion about what is the purpose of preservation in that regard, but
not legally.
I am, yeah, I know we get that exactly. But I want to highlight that the CHC did approve our refreshment center plans, which included lighting plans, and the things that you saw were in a lot of those documents. And so the CHC has approved what we have set up to be the plan. So I appreciate Nancy's concerns about it, and I share them as well, just to make sure we preserve as much as we can from the building. But we have the authority, I think, to move forward with that plan. So we're working on, you know, finalizing a contractor and finalizing funding, and we'll be coming back to CHC with, you know, before you start, as I said, breaking ground, we with more plans and things, because that's part of our preservation restriction agreement. So, but I can hear the differences of how our vision is for the building.
How what? I'm sorry.
Our different visions that we have for the
yeah.
we have for the building, and what its purpose should be in our community.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Well, I'm not sure the CPC needs to weigh in on the purpose of the building in the community, but we do want to make sure that the funding that we recommend that the town meeting goes directly to systems that support the historic preservation of the building. Andrew, do you have a comment or a question
So
for
I just
Tom?
had a question about the wiring up to code and the fixtures. I had a comparable concern about fixtures, but that's already been beaten to death. My question had to do with uh, you only presented in the revised applic or the clarifying letter. I don't know. I don't want to call it a revised application. It only included a wiring plan for the first floor and the basement. Is there a plan to also have CPC funds used on the second floor? Because that was in the initial application for the same amount of money, and I just didn't know if that was just something that was considered but just didn't get spelled out.
It's probably was considered. It's to be honest with you, we didn't get an electrician to do a deep dive analysis of what's needed. So it was more of a general quote about what we need to do. And as they were to look at what's necessary on the second, and I'll call it even on the third floor, because there are a lot of issues in terms of the wiring on the third floor, which is actually in some ways more original and more at risk because it's just bare wood and very frequently. But I'd like some
Oh, whoops.
if we can do it within the budget, that they would do that. But I would want to make sure that that the priority is the first floor, the basement.
Okay, I think that Andrew says, okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Tom, do you have matching funds or any kind of other funding for this project other than CPC?
We've got several projects underway, and for things on the outside that we're going to be in terms of repairing and repainting and working on the doors and things of that nature that we're working with the national parks. So we have some additional funding, but not for this particular assignment.
Okay.
But if we need it, my feeling was once we got in the middle of this, and because I've worked with old buildings before. When you work with old buildings before, you discover things that you hadn't planned on, and if it goes beyond the cost that what CPC has provided funding, then we'll have to fund that ourselves through some mechanism, whatever that could be, a grant or private funders or whatever.
Nancy? Nancy, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Tom, you mentioned doing work on the doors, and some of that work is underway. On the
No, it's not. It's not underway yet because we still need to select a contractor for what would be doing. So we're a long ways away from having to do anything to the doors.
Oh,
We just know
okay.
that the doors need to be worked on, but that obviously that's something we much closely going to involve the CHC on that.
I think at the doors, maybe the two main doors, maybe two of the most important and
Right.
oldest things in the building, and we have no idea what you're planning to do at the Historical Commission.
Right. Well,
And-
just to reassure you, there's nothing been decided on anything we're going to do there.
Okay, just
So
double check.
you don't worry. I mean,
Okay,
we all worry about it, but don't worry because
Okay.
there's no contractors, nothing going on. And if
well, it might be good to contact us about contractors.
sure, yeah,
I mean,
okay.
we probably
We have
don't.
some good ones, but yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
Ed, do you have a question or comment for
Yeah, I
this?
have a couple of questions. First, my comment is that it is the most important building in town. I mean, there's other ones, but I think most people would say that this is probably we need to make sure this building is structurally sound, as Nancy was saying. Just my little straw poll of people that are involved. One with the First Parish. Her suggestion was maybe the Concord Museum could be consultant on this plan. They've done such an excellent job, and you worked closely with them during the 1775 celebration. But my big problem, and I think this is Nancy was saying the same thing. You're talking about upgrading or renovating the electrical system. My feeling when going down there in the basement, that the whole thing needs to be completely redone. I mean, it can't take out everything, but then you have tenants, it would be very disruptive to how the building is run right now. So I just think it needs a lot of tweaking to get it up to the point where and it'll take a lot more funding than what we're being asked for on this thing. But we want to be helpful and encourage you that maybe we could suggest something for a further study of how to really clean out all the old unused electrical wiring that's in there and what it would cost, to put in a modern system. So these are just my concerns, but the main thing is that we really want this building to survive. So
yeah, me too.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Yeah, I think in my experience, I think combining the 35,000 and the 42,000 into 77,000, that would definitely cover both the upgrade to 400 amp service and bringing wiring up to code in a building of that size. I've been in the basement a couple of times as well. And I think that's a pretty healthy budget for that work. Having said that, I wonder if you have gotten any quotes yet, Tom, for any of this work, or are you looking at any kind of contractors that, well, I guess Nancy already asked this, but it would be great if you had a contractor who had some experience working on historic homes or antiques or antique buildings.
Right.
Have you gotten any quotes yet from those guys?
So we got initially a quote. We got these numbers. We got it from an electrician that we've worked with before, who's worked a lot in the building, but he was retiring, and I'm not so have as much confidence in his successors, shall we say. So I accepted his budget, which is where we came up with the scope of the numbers. But I very much intend to, if we get approval, we have some time now because it has to go through town meeting and then it's not available until July. We're going to have serious conversations with there are like 3 or 4 firms that we're now we're talking with about doing different projects. And so we're getting to know those other contractors and and we've got some recommendations. And I think, I'll take Nancy up on our offer to check to see if the people we're talking to are the same people that the CHC would recommend as well. I just didn't want to lock in somebody because I'm not quite sure we have get the funding or not. So the sense is it's probably scope is fine, and then you can negotiate with a contractor. But I'm concerned. I want to make sure that the person who works there absolutely knows the Department of Interior standards, knows how to work within the historic building, and I'm not too sure that the people who are the successors are really prepared for that. So that's why we haven't really locked in on a contractor yet.
Well, I want to thank you, Tom, for mentioning that. And I have to say, many of our other applicants have turned in either one quote or multiple competing quotes to show us where their budget numbers are coming from. And I think the sense of it is that they don't necessarily lock down the contractor at the time of their application. They just get a sense of in that moment, moment of the year, how much would this work cost, knowing full well that it could grow. I guess we found this out with the Ride Out Parks steel there's like a study group going on in my house right now for midterm studying, and it's totally distracting. But anyway, sometimes the costs, they rise over time, and then you're right, it gets a little confusing, like what you get to use your money for. But having said that, the strength in this application is you, the applicant, and your team, the board, or your hearts are all in the right place, and we know that. I want to ask one question about the preservation restriction. I guess this goes to Nancy. Once the preservation restriction that he's working on actually goes through, then isn't it true that pretty much all the work on the house has to get reviewed by Historic Commission?
Yeah.
And preferably not after the contractors are chosen and the plans are set.
Well, it's always interesting because there's sort of a bit of a Rubik's Cube.
I know.
One hand, to talk to a contractor, you need to talk about what you're talking about. On the other hand, we need to involve the CHC. So we have 2026 is going to be a year in which we learn how to work together. I think because there's several projects that we have sort of in the pipeline.
Okay.
Somebody else besides me wants.
Okay, Jeff.
Thanks, Eve and Nancy and Tom. additional information. Eve, I still like the mechanical and electrical assessment and plan since our visit, dealing with that spider web of electrical in the basement, and bringing the wiring up to code and installing fixtures, the assessment of HVAC, that seems like forward looking and something that, would help the trust move forward with their planning and some contract management fees and contingency. I'm still puzzled or don't see how the service upgrade to 400 amp fits.
Yeah, me too.
So let me, if I could try to respond, I really appreciate that. I thought that was a really good question because you have to sort of, and I don't know the load capacity of what we're going to need, but I do know that the preliminary contractors we've worked with who've been looking at and kind of giving us a quote for installing the refreshment center, and looking at what refrigeration we need to have in place. There are going to be heating elements, not that much because we're not doing that much heating. Most of it's water and plumbing and electrical work and things of that nature and sewage, et cetera. But there's a lot of with lighting and refrigeration that we want to put in place. They all said you're probably going to need to have to upgrade the electrical service. And I worry about, once again, it's like for what we're talking about right now, we might not need it. We might be able to get away with not having to do it. But once again, while you're doing the electrical work, it's sort of do you do what you're doing that's going to build capacity for the future while you're doing the work to upgrade the electrical work? Our thinking is that while we're expanding to do a number of things within the building itself, you need to have capacity to be able to do that. So do you install that capacity now or when the lights don't work because you've overextended the current capacity? So we're more in the mindset that says it's not that much more to go from 200 to 400, but the capacity would be significant in terms of what it would allow us for the future. And so it may not be all that we need right now, but it may be exactly what we need 3 years from now, 5 years from now. So it's that thinking process, which is why while we're doing this work, let's do it so we don't have to do it again.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Eva, I guess I to your question of saying we often have quotes with the applications. We have lines in here saying that the initial electrical assessment suggests we may need this in the future. Tom just stated that again, and I'm not seeing the nexus to historical preservation either in terms of what services and electrical loads that will support. So, Eve, I don't know how you want to move forward in this, but when we're getting towards the end of the conversation here, I would like to. I could support a grant to the trust, sort of excising that line, and when we keep the whole contract management fees and contingency. I think that would be 88,000 going forward.
Okay, that's a good thought. I want to say that the 400 amp upgrade, which we've mentioned a couple of times now, is contingent on or is supporting a plan that may or may not move forward based on the Historic Commission's assessment after the preservation restriction goes into place. From my understanding of the timing of all this, that first you get a preservation restriction, then you're working on the plan for the future of the building and the components needed to execute that vision with the Historic Commission. And then after that, it may be required that we need 400 amp upgrades in a couple of years. Is that the timing of that? Do you think?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I am. I'm asking you.
So we have been, as I said, we've been acting as if it's in place. So we've been talking to the Historic Commission, and when we worked with our architects to design the refreshment center and spent quite a bit of time with them on what it would look like and the paint colors and the electrical lights and the whole thing. We would follow that procedure as if the preservation restriction agreement was in place. So the only disagreement I have with, I think what you outlined, Eva, is correct. but let's not get technical about has it been signed or not been signed, because I'm not sure we would have operated any differently if it had been signed versus what we have been. I want to make sure that we've been acting for the last several years in concert with what that agreement is all about.
Not with the whole commission.
So if we haven't, then I like to, we need to, slow things down to make sure we are, because that, I think that agreement is important to be done and not to be held up because attorneys are taking their time to get things. They get paid by the hour or whatever. So
Yeah, no, I understand. And whereas Jeff recommended that we fund this application less that 42,000 line item, I might be interested in funding this application to the total $130,000 if the preservation restriction is signed and enacted before the first drawdown happens. I might consider
Well,
something like that.
that doesn't give the historical commission any voice in how things proceed. You're funding a program to proceed with certain direction.
Only if
The increase in the electrical service is being driven by the brewery and the refreshment center.
but Nancy,
And that isn't, I don't see that as as eligible for historic preservation funding.
So there might be a conversation that Historic Commission needs to have with the Wright Tavern Board and Tom that we don't need to have here, but I do think that conversation needs to happen before the CPC money is drawn down in the summer. And you said that it was underway. This preservation restriction was underway right now with the church, and it's stalled and all this stuff. But we can put in our memorandum of understanding that that preservation restriction has to be in place before this money will be dispersed, right? I think
I think that's one condition, but then I don't think we should agree to fund things that we don't know what they're going to look like.
Well,
and I think I just lost you. I lost the picture. I'm sorry. I think I can hear you.
Okay, well, you work on your IT problems, Nancy, and we're going to listen to Andrew now.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. No, I was I've been going back and forth with this as well. For me, the 200 to 400 amp, I'm not sure if I don't have an opinion about it one way or the other from a like this is good or bad for the Wright Tavern. My only thought has been I'm just not convinced it's actually preservation eligible. If they went in there and said, we want to do this, that's fine. But they're asking for CPC money, which has rules about how you can spend on preservation. And that's why I was asking about the lighting fixtures, because there are rules about how lighting fixtures are supposed to be done. It's you do it in a way that preserves what's there, you take into account, but the wiring behind those lighting fixtures is not a concern. If they would like to rewire that building, I think that makes a lot of sense, because that's a significant risk for a very historic building. We saw in the basement, it is a hodgepodge. And if you actually have someone go through that and say, look, we just need to rewire the whole first floor, great, go for it. Use that lighting plan as the starting point of where you're going to run those new wires, and then work with whoever you need to work with. But where the CPC money is going to be used to pay for new fixtures, that's a different discussion. That's the part I keep getting hung up on. Is this is a great plan for what they would like to do. I just don't know what is appropriate for CPC to pay for. And some of this seems to go too far. That said, I mean, the mechanical assessment, the electrical assessment, rewiring the whole building, it's fine. I'm happy for that. The fact that they don't really have an estimate for it. $42,000 or not 42, sorry, $35,000 sounds like a very appropriate estimate to rewire that whole building. Regardless, and then they can spend that on things that are appropriate and not new lighting fixtures, and they can work on whatever they need to do, and that's fine. But yeah, so that it's conflating a source of funding with historic preservation is where I'm getting antsy.
Okay. Unfortunately, our back is against the wall as a committee that we need to make a decision on this because our warrant article is due, which we're going to talk about next. I guess I have a procedural question, and Burton or someone who's been here. Burton, are you with us, Burton?
I am.
Okay. Or Anne or somebody who's done this before. Are we allowed to vote to support bringing a lesser amount than requested to town meeting? Like if we wanted to take the 42,000 out and support this application for 88,000, is that something we just do on the fly, or do we have to have another round of submitting things? Anyone want to weigh in on that, Anne or Burton or anyone?
Like we can do that. We're just funding it for less, right?
Yeah,
For
we
less.
we can. Yeah, we can't expand this funding, but we can provide less funding than was originally requested. Whatever refund needs to be within the scope of the original request, though.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that we have to go back to the original application, or this? I'm going to say that this is an amended application because there's a
Yeah, I
new
mean,
budget in there.
there's some dialogue back and forth, but let me put it this way: like, so the applicant submits an application to replace their car transmission. We can't go and say, well, we're paying for snow tires, right? But if it's the transmission and a connected part, I think that we can do that. I mean, we've had that dialogue with applicants before in terms of tweaking. Well, to bring it back to this particular application, if we were talking about, let's say, we want to fund a historic preservation survey in addition to some initial amount of work, and that was part of the dialogue, I think we could do that.
Some of the figures match the original application.
Yep.
Mhm.
So that's not a problem.
Right.
Okay. Burton, would you like to make a motion? How do we want to say this?
With respect to the motion I just want to, Eva, I want to understand where you're going. To support adding this back into what is our proposed recommendation based upon this smaller request. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to take a vote. I think we all would like to take a vote and move on with our lives, but I would like to take a vote on supporting the application from the Right Tavern at some level. And I'm not sure, I think probably the theme I'm sensing here is that we need to remove the $42,000 for 400 amp service for now. And if it really is a 3-year timeline on that, then that can be requested next year. Once the plan is really fleshed out and the preservation restriction is in place and everybody's in agreement about that. So I suppose I would like to entertain a motion to fund the Right Tavern application up to $88,000 with this new list here, less the upgrade service to 400 amp. Does that make sense?
I have a
Does
question.
Nancy?
go ahead.
Doesn't the contingency amount get adjusted? You're putting $18,000 in for contingency to make it 88,000 instead of 70. And I suppose contingency is something you have to put in there, but isn't that a standard percent?
Tom, did you use a percentage amount or a
I
fixed
used
fee?
about a 16%, something like that in the neighborhood, and kind of rounded it a bit.
So 70 times 0.15, 70,000. I'm not good at math.
So, yeah.
That line was in there at about 9% of the other costs.
The initial application had broken out the contingency and contract management approvals as separate items, and this one combined them. So I don't know. I just want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples when you start cutting one of the numbers that was provided. They don't line up between the two documents.
Yeah.
Who's going to manage the contract, by the way? Is that going to be somebody who knows about the Secretary standards and what we have to conform to?
Well, there are two possible. One obviously is when working with our architects to oversee what we're doing. And second is the contractor itself is somebody, one of our requirements is that they have the secretary, they understand the secretary standards. So that's a pretty much of a baseline awareness of those requirements.
And DSK, right?
Mhm.
And do they have any historic preservation people?
Yeah,
They do.
yeah, oh yeah, very much so. They do a lot of work in historic properties.
Well, that's a different question.
But I bet, and people who are familiar with the Department of Interiors, Department of Interiors.
Gotcha. Okay.
So in order to even
Standards
get a
for
permit to
historic
do all of
properties.
this work, the electric work especially, you
Mhm.
have to run this by the building department, which will
Mhm.
then trigger a review by historic commission.
Mhm.
Anyhow, regardless of
Right.
whether you have a restriction on as well. And even
Right.
more so, I think, if you have a preservation restriction
Right.
on it.
Right.
So there will be a point at least where you bring all of this before the historic commission, before you get started with the construction. And they will be able to review your plans, make an assessment on how worthy the people on the team are to execute this work, etc.
Mhm.
I've just done a quick calculation and I hope I'm right, but I just took out the 18,000 and the 42,000 and got the number down to 70,000, and I multiplied it by 1.16 for a total of 81,200,
Mhm.
which is less than the 88,000 that we had said before.
Mhm.
So if your contingency is actually 16% contingency, that would be your final number, which is 81,200.
Mhm.
Do you want a motion?
Yeah, I kind of do. That.
I can make a stab at it, and I would recommend having a signed preservation restriction prior to
Mhm.
final approval, or that may not be
Well, I
the
think you
right.
said
but
If I-
the disbursement, before the disbursement of funds is what you said.
Yeah, I think before the first disbursement of funds, we need the signed preservation restriction in place.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve the $15,000 for mechanical and electrical assessment and plan, including reviews with CPC and CHC, bringing the current wiring up to code at $35,000. The assessment of HVAC current conditions and plan at $20,000, and whatever Eve said about the contingency. With
Okay.
the understanding that the preservation restriction would be signed and finalized before the disbursement of any money.
So that's a lot. And again, the final number is 81,200.
Mhm.
Okay, so does everybody understand that motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote again. Nancy?
Aye.
Who have we got here? Jeff?
Aye.
Andrew?
Yes.
Burton?
Yes.
Ed?
Oof.
Yes, I think Ed said yes, reading his lips, and I say yes too. Okay, so that
say yes.
passes. And Tom, the only reason this is taking so long and it seems so difficult is that we all care so much.
I know, and so do I.
You're
So
doing good work.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
good work.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I mean, I want to, part of the learning process has always been this kind of dialogue. I've been through a lot of these conversations. I have a lot more I'm going to go through. And I just want to say, I really appreciate your support. And we will make very good use of these funds. I just thank you very much.
Well, I hope to see you again next
you,
year.
Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Okay. I'll sign off.
Okay,
Okay.
with that, I'm going to ask that Diane Proctor turn her camera back on and join us. And Diane, do you want to say who you are?
Sorry, Select Board appointee Diane Proctor. I'm sorry, we couldn't get our Wi-Fi to work. It went down all over the place, but we called our son and he kind of walked us through things and we're back up online. So I'm so sorry.
It's good to have you.
So apologize.
No, thank you for coming, Diane. I appreciate it. I think the next thing up on our agenda is to, let's see, continued discussion of CPA funding available for FY27 and reserve allocations. Did everybody get to see in the meeting documents that we got our final amount?
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know if we need to discuss that. That's just a fact.
The way it is.
Yeah. I'd really love to get to Burton's question of the 2 warrant articles and to talk through a little bit more about our final recommendations. This becomes the Anne show. She is reluctant, but I think that you are capable of guiding us through the 2 warrant article discussion, if you will. I'm cleaning up my desktop.
Okay. So I'll bring up the first warrant article. Let's see.
Did you discuss the select board meetings discussion last night, Eve?
Are you talking about the conservation fund?
Yes.
Yes, we voted and it passed.
Okay, I just didn't, oh, thank you, Anna. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so this year we're proposing, well, the town, I guess, is proposing that there be 2 warrant articles. I brought this up last year since I was advised by the Community Preservation Coalition that this is what most towns and cities do, is that there are 2 separate warrant articles. One is for the budget for CPA for the whole year, and the second one is for the recommendations. This year we have a new CFO, and she has a lot of experience in community preservation, funds and committees, and she recommends this strongly as well. So she and I worked on this together, and Eve has reviewed it. This would be the first warrant article, which just outlines the budget for the CPA. And as you see in the explanation down here, it goes over how much you anticipate, or the finance division anticipates for revenues for this year, which is about 2.5 million. And then it breaks that down into the 10% reserves for the 3 required reserve accounts. That's the historic preservation, housing, and open space. And then this committee reserves 50,000 for administrative expenses, although it could be up to 5%. So that's really the sort of the basics for how to allocate the revenues that come in. And these are like required allocations for the reserve accounts. And then in addition, there are reserves from last year. Let's see. Oh, right. And also, of course, I should have explained that a change that you all made last year was, instead of leaving money in undesignated funds, we put it into budgeted reserves so that it's accessible for the entire year. And instead of, well, okay, so you do the allocations for the 10%, the administrative funds, whatever is left goes into budgeted reserve. And then in addition, there are funds left over from last year, which would also go into budgeted reserve. So then you have a good picture of, what you have for a budget in terms of new funds and funds left over. And then of course, then there's additional funds that were in reserve accounts from last year. And then finally, there's the whole business of rescinding and reappropriating funds from the Warner's Pond dredging projects. So that's the second piece. So this is just kind of a cleaner way of explaining to hopefully to you all and to the public and to the select board, like what the total amount is for the CPA. And here's, yeah. Actually, it's
Okay.
split between two. So here it is, the entire amount here. And then in the second warrant article, that's the spreadsheet. You just basically take these same amounts described here and put them up at the top of the columns. So it's a much simpler spreadsheet. Open space reserve funds, totaling all of those different buckets that we talked about in the budget article. This is like the 250 plus what was left over from last year. This is just the 250, and then the rest is budget reserves. And then you sort of, take, you're required to spend down the 250 in reserves from the 3 accounts. And so Eve and I and the CFO have, tried to lay it out in a way that makes sense. And some of these you really have no choices. You've got, let's see, like for community housing, you have to spend the 250, and then you take from budget reserves to get the full amount. The only one that you would have, and the same for historic preservation. Since this doesn't total 250 and you've already put money aside for 250, that would just stay in the reserve account. So the one that you have flexibility on would be the open space funds. So you can either take them from the open space reserves or from the budgeted reserves.
Okay, Anne, I think that 500,000 that you just put in the conservation fund, I believe 482,978 would be in that open space budget, and then the rest of it would be coming out of budgeted reserves, right?
Yes.
The rest of it is $17,022. I also, poor Anne, I'm also running this at the same time she's doing it on my own computer, so I get to double check her. But anyway, I had to think about this for a really long time before I understood what Anne was talking about, because it wasn't obvious to me in the beginning. But I do like the idea of the first warrant article. What she was recommending we do is just shows what our budgeted reserves, what money we're funding our budgeted reserves for, like how we're spreading out the money that we are allowed to disperse or to recommend that gets dispersed into budgeted reserves, the 3 buckets that we need to fill, plus an admin, which shouldn't be an application at all because we have to fund our admin. So it's not really a legit application. And then the second warrant article shows which projects are coming out of which buckets that we are suggesting that the town support. Does that make sense? Okay. Burton, I know you've thought about this a lot too.
Just trying to get up from the deal. Yeah, I have. So I guess it seems like what we're doing is we're doing an article that shows our internal accounting. But is this something? I'll ask the question 2 ways. Is this something that the town needs to vote on for us to be able to actually fund particular projects? And then the opposite of that is what happens if the first article failed and the second article passed, or vice versa?
I don't know. She didn't answer that question about what would happen if the 2 articles were voted on differently. And I guess that might happen if there was a huge miscommunication in the presentation, such that the town got the idea that these 2 things were separable.
But if they're not separable, why are we having 2 articles? I guess that goes to that's really my point. We've survived for, what is it? How many years with the CPC been active in Concord? Is it 18 years? And we've done 1 article that's covered our recommendations, and we voted on that. And now we've got a recommendation to do something different, which is have 2 articles. And I just worry about a point of failure. which is that one article may not pass. And what the heck does that mean if our budget passes, but our appropriations don't, or our appropriations pass and our budget doesn't?
Mhm.
We could
Yeah.
bring it up to, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, you go. Yeah.
We could bring it up to town council and maybe
I mean, what's the reason? I mean, is there an elevator pitch reason for doing this other than the recommendation of our new CFO? I mean, what's what's sort of the mechanics of it? I simply don't understand.
Well, part of it is the budgeted reserve business, where you want access to those funds all year round, whereas if they go into the undesignated fund, you wouldn't have access to them. The other part is the 10% and the other reserves, and having that it lays it out clearly for the short term, but also for the long term. If those funds are later rescinded, they automatically go into the right bucket, whereas that
Okay.
could be lost if you do it the way you have been doing it. Right, and it's one of those best practices. And I guess also this year with the whole business of rescinding and reappropriating funds, it also makes it clear in the budget that like where those funds are coming from. And I
Okay.
guess Keith in the past has also brought up how much do you have in total, and sometimes it seems like some of the funds, it's not clear where they are, that there are budget reserves that aren't showing up in these spreadsheets, and it's just more transparent, I think, to the public, where you can see the full budget and what exactly is where.
Okay.
Burton,
I think that could be something that could be addressed in our town meeting presentation. I will be honest that if I can't get this and the rationale, and having been on this committee for, I don't know, 7 years, I think that our town meeting members are going to be completely baffled by it.
Burton, I like your idea that maybe they don't need to see the back of the house accounting. The town doesn't.
Mhm.
I want to read what Jennifer Barrett wrote to me and Anne, explaining this rationale, if you don't mind. It's just two
No,
sentences.
please.
She says, my rationale for completing the new authorizations first, new authorizations meaning dumping money into buckets and funding the staffing. My rationale for completing the new authorizations first and then the rescinding is more along the lines of taking care of easy business first. And then if there's discussion on why old monies aren't spent, it's easier to amend the article with just a period halfway through. So that's for the first warrant article. We're rescinding money and adding it to our buckets and showing where our buckets are going. You'll see I reworked the explanation as well, blah, 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 giving parts in the text and totals in the list. People tend to focus on lists and tables, and that's the main info that declares what's available and how. So that's the main info that the first warrant article declares what is available and how. And then the second warrant article shows what project specifically. And I think this comes around when people don't really know how much money we have or where it's coming from. So that was her rationale. It's also, she says, it's also just her opinion on how we could do things. It's her recommendation based on her experience with other CPCs, and it doesn't mean that we have to organize our warrant article that way. We could go back to the good old way too, if we want to. Okay, Diane.
Hi. I know I've missed the early part of the discussion, and again, I apologize. Or our machine here apologizes. I agree with Burton. Not only is this confusing, but it suggests to me, and help me understand if I'm wrong, but it suggests to me that what we're asking the town to do is to approve our budget. And actually, that's not under their aegis. We have a budget. We may be wanting to put a paper on the table to explain what our budget is and what various buckets we have and how that might be used. But we really don't need a vote to approve our budget. That's already exists. I think what we have traditionally done, and the thing that matters, is for the town to know how we're using the money we have. I believe in transparency completely. But I think what they really need to know is, all right, how are we expending the monies we have? Now, if we want to attach, and there are ample opportunities to do this in various documents, the kind of resources we have and how they've needed to be moved around for various reasons, then that's wonderful, and that explains things. But I don't think that we need to get the town's knickers in a twist and deeply involved in trying to discuss budgetary complexities. I'm not sure that's something that goes well at town meeting, and I'm not sure it's something that is easily clarified at town meeting.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing we do here in committee. I don't believe it's appropriate to be doing that in front of the whole town, but explain to me if I'm wrong, and I'm happy to learn.
Diane, this is mostly about the rescinding of funding from Warner's Pond that remember how we were talking about?
I understand that. And if they
So-
want to have a separate little item that says we're taking some money from one and putting it in another, the way we, I think, inappropriately did 2 years ago, and we were told then by legal counsel that we didn't have to, we can do that. Otherwise, I think we simply present a document explaining what we've done. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks we're out there, at least I don't believe anybody thinks we're out there in some sort of fancy leisure domain, moving things from innocent pockets to other hidden pockets. I mean, I think they trust that we do things responsibly, that it's being overseen responsibly, and that here is the result of the funds we have. And then show them from there. But I really think the other just puts us in a quagmire that is quite likely to be obfuscating at best. But
So your suggestion, if I'm correct, is that we put the rescinding of funds in with the second well, we wouldn't have two, but we'd basically just have the second warrant article explaining all of our projects, and then add to that, oh, and by the way, we intend to rescind this money from these projects that didn't ask for it back or ask for an extension, all in one warrant article.
Yeah, that's simply explained in an accompanying document, so people can see what we did. I mean, we're not trying to obfuscate something, but I mean, I don't think we're doing anything that's illegal. We're doing something that's very straightforward, and I think presenting that so people know what it is as an accompanying document, and then explaining how we're using the resources. Seems to me
Andrew?
sufficient.
Oh, sorry, Diane. Did you want to finish?
No, I think I've said quite enough. Okay.
And if you want to respond to Diane, I think that would be a good way to move the discussion along, and then we'll move to Andrew.
Right, just a clarifying point. I think there does need to be a vote on the rescinding at town meeting. It couldn't be a clarifying document. It needs to be a vote. That I've heard that many, many times, that and if there is no vote, then that money would not be available. It would go into that undesignated fund, and you'd have to wait a year to access it.
I think what I guess
Okay. Well, that makes sense as long as we're just saying that there's some money we're rescinding and here we go. But to get more complicated than that and to suggest that the whole budget is under review, I think is a serious mistake.
Okay.
Is there a chance that the rescinding of money might be voted down in town meeting?
I would be very surprised if it were. We could make it sufficiently confusing that it might be.
That's actually why I have my hand up.
Okay, Andrew, let's have it.
My biggest concern is when you throw in a whole bunch of stuff you don't need, that's where the questions are going to come from. It's not going to be the rescinding. It's going to be, well, you said you had this 10% bucket. People are going to say, well, how can we see the 10%? What's this 10%? There's all this background information you're giving about which bucket it goes into. You're going to have people asking questions about, do we always appropriate $50,000? Do we always do this? Why are we doing something different? And it's literally, if it was like a 3-line, like there's money in a project that's not being used and it needs to be rescinded so we can spend it this year, it will be a 10-second thing. If you put all of the text that Anne just put there, we as a committee went back and forth, like I think it was like 4 straight meetings having 20-minute discussions about where this money came from, what it was. You're going to have that again at town meeting.
Yeah.
I don't see any way you would avoid it.
Just a disaster if anybody's paying attention. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's not even if you're paying attention. If you read all the material, it's still very difficult to decode and understand.
Absolutely.
But people understand, okay, if you just say, hey, this money can be put here and only here, people say, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So keep it simple is my only suggestion.
Yep.
Alrighty. Keith, we're discussing the warrant article. Do you have any comments or questions about that?
Yes, thanks. I do. I had sent Eve and Anne an email at the end of December asking to make sure that the language that's in that worksheet does not appear in the warrant article for the trust's funding because it's wrong. It says adding affordable SHI units. And we are not doing that. We are implementing the housing production plan. And the reason, and in fact, this is the same conversation that I had a year ago with this committee, which led to the language of adding to the SHI that had been in prior years. It was not in this past year, though. And the reason is because our CPA funds are for up to 100% of area median income. SHI units can only be up to 80% of AMI. The trust last year and this year applied for community housing funds to implement the housing production plan at up to 100% of AMI. You approved that application last year and this year, and the language in the article last year, or in the 2025 annual town meeting article, described the project as implementing housing production plan. So I would urge you not to include language that says adding affordable SHI units, but instead have it read the same as it read in 2025, implementing housing production plan. Otherwise, I can't spend the money for if I have SHI in there, I'm stuck at 80%, and we've applied for 100% of AMI. So thanks very much.
Okay, Keith, thank you. I got your email about that and I read it and I referred back to the document you mentioned, which was the workbook, which is actually the chart that pops up when you click workbook in our meeting documents. And I didn't see anything about AMI or SHI in there. It was just the list of what was requested. So I got a little confused, but I think it would be a good idea to review do you see it there? I don't see it.
I just corrected it. So thank
that's
you
why.
so much, Keith, for that reminder.
There we go.
It's corrected.
Okay. All right, we have Paul.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to mention that apropos of the earlier discussion of the Conservation Fund, there was a bylaw introduced and passed by the select board last night. That will be introduced. That bylaw has to pass before the Conservation Fund can be funded by CPA.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure whether you want to pull that out as a separate warrant article or just be prepared to, in the unlikely case where the Conservation Fund is defeated and you'd have to amend the entire article. So it's up to you how to handle that, but there is a sequencing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Diane.
Yeah, that was part of the reason I asked when I came on whether you had discussed that yet. I think that article is going to have to come up first, and we can work with Carmen to make sure it does. I think it's highly unlikely, Paul, that it won't pass.
Mhm.
But if it does, then we can always amend our article to reduce money.
Yeah.
We just can't increase it.
Yeah, I think at this point it's just a sequencing that you ought to be aware of.
That's what I think. That's what I was hoping to bring up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Wendy?
Hi, just a quick comment, and I think Anne should weigh in on this. There might need to be a separate vote to support the creation of a reserve fund. If I recall, that graphic had two different reserve funds in it. And if you're going to put money into a reserve fund, you need to have a vote at town meeting to do that. So just a comment. Anne can take that further.
Yeah, Anne, you're on mute.
I don't think she heard you.
Anne, you're still on mute.
Right. So it sounds as if you're you are recommending a single warrant article, not two. And so we could do what we did last year and just add at the bottom of the spreadsheet, the budgeted reserves down at the bottom. So yes, that would have to appear down here as they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Did,
Yes.
Did you hear, Anne, what Wendy said?
So, and I make this comment because I'm creating other reserve funds. There'll be warrant articles for reserve funds, and the town meeting has to take a vote if you're creating a formal fund, a new reserve fund. So one of these might exist already, but if the housing fund or the budget reserve fund doesn't exist, I think that's an explicit vote.
Yes, so that would be added down at the bottom of the spreadsheet under all of the recommendations, all of the other reserves.
Yeah, I just think that's why Jennifer wanted to have that earlier warrant, but you'll follow up and do what's legally required.
Yes, certainly.
I think I understand that now. That's why she recommended 2 warrant articles so that we could always make sure that we had our reserve funds straightened out before we started dispersing money out of them. But anyway, we'll do it with the 1 article, and we already had a historic preservation reserve and a open space reserve. And we're not trying to get a housing reserve outside because all of our housing money is being dispersed. So it won't show up as anything new, Wendy. Oh, Anne?
Oh, sorry, I need to lower that.
Actually, Anne, do we need to discuss the boat dock so that we know how much money we're rescinding for the warrant article? Maybe we do. I'm sorry, Peggy. I
Yes.
see your hand is up, but I just realized that we don't really, for our warrant article, we don't know how much money we're trying to rescind yet because we haven't voted on the extension request for the boat dock at the Warner's Pond. Is that right?
Right, so this would need to be a vote too, and that's also why we had created this separate warrant article, because this does need a vote. We sort of left it vague here so that if you were not prepared yet to vote on the extension request, you could simply say that 264,000 remains appropriated pending further discussion or pending further consideration of an extension request. But if you are ready to vote, you could have it be specific. You could say 264,000 remains for the boat launch improvements at Warner's Pond.
Yeah. Does everybody understand what the situation is here? Do all my committee members understand about this boat launch and what's remaining of the money that would come back to us in open space reserves that we want to get straightened out in time for next year?
Yes.
Everybody understand that?
Yeah, more or less.
The magic number, yeah, the magic number is $264,000 for, and if you wouldn't mind putting down your share screen, I just want to be able to see
sure, of course.
more than a couple people at the top of my screen. Thank you. I'm sorry, Peggy, but we just need to finish this up.
Fine.
We had this discussion once in early days in our committee meetings, and then we discussed this again, and we had the public come and comment on, this dock situation. I guess I would like to know if everyone feels like they need some more time to think through the boat dock on Warner's Pond situation some more and the extension request. We got that request in August, and if you haven't formed an opinion already about whether or not to allow that extension request, then will you just nod your head that you need more time on this? Because I don't.
No.
I think
Okay.
I think Bill's presentations or discourse on this have been very illuminating.
Exactly, Diane. That's right. I think Bill has had a lot to say, and I've been listening to him too. Okay, so let's take another vote then on the extension request. Can we pull that up, Anne? Just Delia's words there. If everyone needs to see it again, I have it somewhere in my pile, but sorry. It was like last minute thing
Sorry,
here.
I just need a minute.
Yeah. Well, while we're waiting, Peggy, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I hope this is really simple. I thank you for that laughter, Diane. I was gonna say I do agree with Diane. I think everything you can do to make this warrant article look and feel like every other warrant article that you've done every other year, especially given front page articles in the Concord Bridge. I'm not going to be specific, but I think we want to make it look smooth and effective and not, changing it to have some other town does it, which is, I think, one of the problems we've had. Um, so, I don't think you need a vote to set up the money. It's there. Just keep the spreadsheet pretty much similar. And however we used to rescind money, I'd keep that similar. And I'd be careful about going too deep into the rescission because we don't want to make it all about Warner's Pond. Okay, that's me. I'm done.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peggy. I think you're right that simplicity is best, for sure.
And also the Warner's Pond issue, if that comes up, is going to provoke all sorts of reactions in
Yeah.
town. And so that just that's kind of throwing a hand grenade into the mix.
So basically what this says is that $220,000 of the original $500,000 was for improvements to the Commonwealth Avenue boat launch. And Delia suggests that an additional 20% contingency be added for potential design modifications and increases in cost from the earlier estimates. And I remember lots of comments about this, but I think that we might be ready to vote on this. So I would love to hear a motion from someone, and maybe we put this down again. Can you stop sharing? Thank you for pulling that up so fast, by the way. That was amazing. Does anybody want to? Yeah. Oh, Jeff. Hi.
Eve, just a broken record on this, but I think no, that's not resulting in a new grant agreement, so my hand is down. I don't have a comment here. But I will make a motion to accept his request to retain 220,000 plus the additional funds, 44,000 was it, for, what was it, 264,000?
Contingency.
To retain that amount for Warner.
Is that your first voting motion, Jeff?
Geez, I don't know.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do I hear a second?
A second.
Okay, let's vote on the 264 extension request out of the $500,000. Jeff?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Burton?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes for the extension request. So as sloppily as that was done, I think we got it. Woo! All right, so now we know how much money we're rescinding from that. It's just the difference. And we can put all of that toward our funding proposal for the town. I think that we covered it and we're okay. We have enough money to do all the things that we want to do. And it's all coming out of, Ann and I went through which buckets things could come from. And she actually, that was part of the spreadsheet, which may seem super complicated. I don't know if people want to see that spreadsheet again, but all of that information is sort of laid out there, what buckets are getting money and what buckets are dumping money. Do we want to review that some more, or do you guys care? But it is sorted. It's all sorted. No?
My
Okay,
one recurring recommendation is that whatever presentation we make, we remind people this was an exceptional year.
Yeah.
We don't often have these kinds of resources and that we're grateful for them, but we don't anticipate this in the coming year. our years. I just think getting that out there is really important. So
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, between having money left over from last year and a sudden bump in funds for no reason, and then additionally rescinding funds, this was a bumper crop.
it was a bumper crop.
We have the applications to handle it. So I think we're squeaking by and that we're in good shape. And do you have any other topics that we need to discuss? We've talked about the budget, the project recommendations, the draft warrant article. I think we've got everything we need. Is that right?
I think so. So just, I didn't quite catch all of Jeff's motion. So I just want to make sure that you did vote to rescind and appropriate a total of 482,978. Is that correct?
We didn't vote on that, but that should be next because I
Yes,
guess
you'll
we
need
need
to
to
do
vote
that.
to
Yes.
we need to vote to rescind the rest of the money. So that breaks down to from 250 and then the remainder of what was not extended. Correct? Anne?
Correct.
Does everybody understand that?
That's right.
Okay. We've talked about this so much. I'm pretty sure their eyes are rolling up in their head now. So I would like to propose a motion to rescind the 500 and what now? I should
482,978.
482,978. $482,000 and $978,000. Oh my God. Okay. Those 6 digits that Anne just mentioned, and now I'm in a pumpkin state already. I would like to propose a motion that we rescind that money back into our open space reserves.
I second.
Okay. Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes, aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Burton?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
And Ed?
Yes.
And I'm I as well. So there, now we've done it, Anne. We
Great.
did all the things.
Okay.
Okay.
Covered.
All right, that was a big meeting. We still have more extension requests to go through. We're not going to do those at this time, but that's probably February. And then we're going to review our plan one more time and get that done earlier this year. But anyway, are there any, the next meeting is in February, right? Is the first Tuesday in February? Let me just double check that. Okay. When's our
The
next
first
meeting?
Tuesday or the first Tuesday?
I
Is
thought
it?
I thought it was okay, here we go. It's February 10th. I guess that's the
Yeah, I
second
thought it was
Tuesday.
the second Tuesday, right?
Yeah, February 10th. So I will see you all on February 10th, and we're all going to wish Anne good luck. And thank you very much for writing our warrant article draft before you leave. And I want to thank everybody else for being here. This has been a great discussion, and I really depend on you guys. And I'm glad to be here on Tuesday nights with y'all.
Eve,
Yeah.
you've done a wonderful job. Thank you so
Excellent
much.
job. Yeah.
It's been a very complicated season, and you've handled it with such poise. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
All righty. Goodbye, everybody.
Great night.
Bye-bye.